Let me say what I think I have tried to say several times when we've come up here, that we recognize that we're entering a long process late in the game, and we want to do so with respect for the hard work that's come before us. But we also do believe that the best move for this board to take today would be to not approve the SIP. And we've obviously heard arguments back and forth as to why other folks disagree, but there seems to be what I think is a false choice posed between either do something today or do nothing today and thus wait years until the serious attainment comes and the next level of rulemaking is required. And I guess I'm a little confused why there isn't a third option, which is to pull the SIP back today, make it better, and then resubmit it in a matter of months. So that's essentially the path we would like to see taken. And let me just give a few brief reasons why. First of all, just the context. I think we all know that air quality, just in the past months and weeks, is rising to become an incredibly important issue for Utahns. I think we've all noted newfound attention from the governor and the state legislature. We have Governor Herbert proposing nearly $20 million in his budget. I think it's one of only a couple areas getting new funding. We have the state legislature, which going into last year's session, I think there were basically 2 bills that were prepared that you could qualify as air quality bills. And we're scrambling to count all the ones that are coming right now, but I think we're going to have at least a dozen separate initiatives from the state legislature. So there's a willingness to spend money, there's a willingness to pass new laws, even among sectors that haven't always embraced this issue. There was polling data that came from, I think, the Utah Foundation that was reported in the Tribune recently, that when Utahns are asked what issue do they most want to see improvement in, air quality is #1. It's more important than education, it's more important than healthcare, it's more important than jobs, even in a down economy, which is pretty extraordinary. And so the question we ask this board is, do we think the SIP as it currently stands echoes the urgency and the willingness to be bold, which we're seeing from other sectors on air quality? Now, an issue comes up in a lot of the comments and sometimes in the responses as to why groups like HEAL and others are focusing so strongly on point source cuts, recognizing that other sectors of emissions are larger. Why is this the focus? And I just wanted to briefly answer that because I do think it's an important conversation. First of all, the notion that small cuts aren't important, I think, is a false choice. I think we all know that outside of big sweeping federal standards on cars and gas, every possible cut is small. Everything you can do is fairly modest. And so, whether that is, the kind of rules you folks have passed on hairspray or dry cleaners or all of that valuable stuff, or whether it's, slight tweaks to building codes, or whether it's any of that, ultimately you're talking about a series of modest improvements. But when we aggregate them, we get to big things. So the fact that it's small shouldn't slow us down. And another thing we add is that, folks say, hey, it's better, these industries are cleaner. 20 years ago, they were putting out more, but I think that, the fact that we've had ongoing steady improvement doesn't lessen the urgency to find additional gains in any sector. And for that very reason, we all know, you buy a car today, it's so much cleaner than a 20-year-old car, it's infinitely cleaner than a 40-year-old car, yet, this board and, of course, Governor Herbert and others are calling upon even stricter standards on cars. So we need to keep finding those cuts. And the last one is just a practical one that, this board and division are being asked to do something incredibly difficult, and that's to find enough reductions in a growing valley to reduce air pollution. But the problem is that you can't affect a lot of the biggest sources of that. You folks might want to, find $200 million to greatly boost mass transit, or to, pass the toughest building codes in the nation, or to put in place, innovative public policy tools to encourage investments in building retrofits, or to, find all kinds of money to help, every business reduce emissions. But a lot of that falls beyond what you can do in terms of, what the law allows you to do, and certainly the financial resources. So the practical truth is that point source cuts are the area you have the most direct influence over, and it's what this board can do. Now, those of us that are here today in the room because we're worried about this isn't the only place to go, of course. We want to see the legislature find that money. We want to see the governor pass those laws. So we'll fight there too, but when we come here, it just makes sense that point source cuts are the main focus. I'll just run really quickly. Through our concerns with the SNP, and I recognize again the long line of folks who want to speak, and some of this has come up already from comments from the board, but we're concerned about the lack of urgency. We don't think 2019 is soon enough. The EPA in its comments was very clear about this, that they could find, quote, little or no explanation for why that amount of time is necessary. And I appreciate the DAQ's response in terms of the capital investments and significant lead times, but, you know, 6 years, 5 years just seems like too long. You know, we give them an extra 2-3 years where it could be done, and those are 2 or 3 winters where there's, you know, that much more pollution in the air, and I think that demonstrates a lack of urgency. Secondly, I'm not sure this has come up, but the EPA repeatedly questioned the division as to why you weren't embracing a 24-hour standard, and this is a little complicated, so I might just take a second for folks here that, you know, the way permits are granted mostly is that a given industry is allowed to emit a certain amount per year. And the problem is that on any given day, they might do more than, let's say, 1/365th of that. And because we have an episodic pollution problem, we have a pollution defined not by every day, but defined by, you know, several dozen days a year, there can be a disproportionate impact if one of those days where an industry chooses to pollute more happens to fall upon a day when, you know, levels are rising. So the DAQ's acknowledged that and said that, you know, if you don't do a daily standard, it doesn't limit emissions on a short-term basis. And that bothers us. And I think if we look at the other hard work that you folks have done, like banning wood burning, like encouraging folks to get out of their cars, those are explicitly measures which are put in place to put in place short-term limits. So we think that same lens needs to be applied to industry, and we should be doing it 24 hours